So today I'm going to be showing you how to make this skater style fit and flare dress. I have made the pattern available on my Etsy, so I'll link that down below. It has 3 different length options: mini, knee length and midi. It has 2 sleeves that you can add, either a short sleeve or a longer flared sleeve, and also there is the option to have it sleeveless as well. There are pockets included. You can wear it front to back or back to front for different necklines, so you can either wear it this scoop neck side or a high neck, which is the back when I wear it like this. And as always, I've made it as beginner friendly as possible. I've tried to avoid any sewing like technical terms, and there's no fastenings or anything because it's all made from stretchy fabric, so it should be quite easy to do. So let's get on with the tutorial. So to make this project I will be using an overlocker and a sewing machine. If you don't have an overlocker, you can just do the whole project with a normal sewing machine. You will need some thread. You will need a 4-way stretch fabric. I'm using 95% polyester, 5% elastic, but most stretch jerseys will work absolutely fine. Some of this will be used for a lining of the top, so I quite often like to use just a plain basic jersey for that rather than wasting some of this fabric. You will need some flat braided elastic. This is actually optional, but I like to add it around the armholes and the neckline. You will need some pins, some scissors or something to cut out your pattern pieces, and something to draw out your pattern pieces. I'm using fabric pens. And one final thing that I forgot to mention as well, you will need, or at least I would highly recommend, some form of interfacing for your hems as well. So for this particular pattern, you will have 6 different pattern pieces. You will have a pocket piece, a short sleeve piece, a piece for the scoop neck side of the top, a piece for the high neck side of the top, a piece for your flared sleeve, and also a piece for your skirt. Obviously you won't need to use every single one of those pattern pieces depending whether you're doing it sleeveless, short sleeve or flared sleeve, but I am going to show you how to do all 3 ways in this video. And I'm going to cut my skirt to the knee length option here. Hopefully I will have enough fabric to do that. If not, I will switch to mini. I'm going to try and do the knee length one. So now I'm just going to put all my patterns to one side so that I can lay my fabric out. I'm going to lay my fabric with the right side facing up. So I'm going to start by drawing out my top pieces, my pocket pieces and my sleeves. So you're going to draw 4 of these pocket pieces. If you have a fabric that has a right and wrong side like I do here, you will need to draw 2 in this orientation and then flip it and draw 2 in this orientation. If you are choosing the short sleeve, you want to draw 2 of these, just making sure that you mark this center point here. If you are choosing the flared sleeve, it's the same thing again. You want to draw 2 of these onto your fabric, and again just make sure you're marking the center point. And then for your basic top pieces, you're going to want 2 of each of these. Like I said, if you want to use a different fabric for the lining, you can, or you can just draw 2 out in whatever your basic fabric is. You just need to make sure that you have 2 of each. So now that you've got everything cut out, you should have 2 pieces for your high neck side of the top. Like I said, I like to cut my lining in just like a plain fabric, but you can cut it in your regular fabric. So I've got 2 of those. I've got 2 of the scoop neck side of the top, again with my lining in the different fabric. You should have your 4 pockets. So I've got 2 in this orientation and 2 in this orientation. And then for sleeves, I've only cut 1 out in each sleeve just because I'm just going to be demonstrating how to do that on each side. But obviously if you were doing a short sleeve, you would have 2 of these. And if you were doing the flared sleeve, you would have 2 of these. So now we can move on to cutting the skirt piece out. So now for the skirt piece, we're going to need to fold our fabric in half. So So I've just folded the fabric in half and it's got the fold here. So I'm going to line up my pattern with this fold. So I'm just going to line up this edge with the edge of the fold, and then I'm going to draw that in place, cut it out, and then I'm going to do a second one in exactly the same way. So then once you've finished out cutting out your skirt pieces, you can unfold them and they'll look something like this. Hopefully you won't have cut them with the pattern upside down like I have here. I'm going to see if I've got enough fabric to redo that. If not, we'll just roll with it. And now we're going to move on to the top with the sleeves. So if you want to skip to the sleeveless version, I'll put a time on the video that you can skip to. So I'm going to start with my 4 top pieces, and I'm going to take the lining and I'm going to put that right sides together with your other piece. Just line up all of your edges. And then I'm going to pin that in place around the neckline. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the scoop neck piece. So then once you have pinned around both necklines, you're going to go in and sew this either on an overlocker or with a zigzag stitch. And once you have sewn your 2 layers together around the neckline, I like to go in with some flat braided elastic and sew that right on top of the seam that you're going to sew here. This is optional, but it does add a tiny bit of extra support, a little bit more structure. So you will have already sewn this seam, and then you will just go in again and sew this right around that neckline. So I'm just going to place the top of that neckline under there and then carefully sew around the edge. And then I'm just going to take my elastic, and if you have used a different lining colour like I have, you want to place this on top of your side that is going to be for your dress. So I'm going to place it on this flower side. And just sew that straight on top of the seam that you've just sewn. And just using your finger to kind of like guide it round, but make sure you're not stretching it as you sew it in. So now that you have sewn your lining and your regular piece together, we want to attach the front and back to each other. So I'm going to turn this piece to the right side out. So that it will look something like this. And then I'm just going to thread that up into that other piece, making sure that the right fabric is facing the right fabric. Obviously this doesn't matter if you're using the same fabric for lining and your dress, but since I have 2 different pieces, I'm going to make sure that this flower fabric is facing the flower fabric. And I'm going to put that up inside the strap of the high neck piece. You should have 4 layers of fabric there, and I'm just going to pin that in place. Just zoom in so you can see that a little better on the other side. So you've got your strap that is the right side out, and you want to place it inside your other piece, which is still inside out. And again, just line up your strap and pin in place. And now you can go and sew across this edge, either with an overlocker or with a zigzag stitch. So once you have sewn across this top edge, you just want to open your top out so that it sits flat like this. Now you can start to add your sleeves. So I'm going to add 1 on each side. So I'll do the flared one on this side and the short sleeve on this side, but they are pretty much exactly the same instructions, but just so that you can see each one. So starting with the flared sleeve, you should have left a mark where the central point of this sleeve is. So you're going to line that mark up with the seam that we just made up here and pin that in place. And then I'm going to take this corner of the sleeve and I'm going to match that up to this corner of the top, making sure you're going through both layers of fabric. And then repeating that with the other corner. And then we're going to go in and pin all the rest of the sleeve along these edges. It can be a little bit tricky pinning curved armholes like this or any kind of curved seam. So take your time with it and just try and pin the rest of the way along. So I've just finished adding all of the pins around this sleeve. So I'm just going to move this one out of the way to show you the short sleeve. So this is exactly the same thing. You want to find your halfway mark and line that up with your seam. I should have said this is all with right sides facing together, and pin that in place. And then again, take this corner and match it up here. And your other corner and match it up here. And then again, as we did with the other one, just go in and fill in the gaps. So now that you've finished pinning both of your sleeves in place, you want to just go along this edge and sew it in place either with a zigzag stitch or an overlocker. You want to make sure that you really take your time with this one, because with them being 2 curved edges together, it will be quite tricky. And you also need to make sure that you get all 3 layers of fabric in your stitch. And then just repeat this for the other sleeve. So then once you've sewn your sleeves in place, you'll have something like this, except you will probably have chosen to do matching sleeves on each side. And then you're going to fold it kind of like in on itself so that the right side of the fabric is facing the right side of the fabric. So you want to fold all the way down the sleeves and straight down this seam that we sewed not long ago. And then pin along the sleeves and down the side of the top, and then again The same on this side. And then I'm just going to go in and sew straight down these edges, again either with an overlocker or with a zigzag stitch. So once you have sewn down these edges, your top is more or less complete. So I'm just going to turn it to the right side out. And then the final thing that you will have left to do is just to hem your sleeves, but I'm going to do that in exactly the same way as I'm going to do the skirt, so I will show you once I have added that. And the only other thing that you might want to do, just to give it a bit more of a professional finish, is to add some top stitching around the neckline and around the armholes, or even just around the neckline. I am going to be doing this on the sleeveless version, which I'm about to show you how to do, so I'll leave a timestamp if you want to see me doing that on the sleeveless version, because it's exactly the same as how you would do it on this one. So I'm going to show you how to make the sleeveless version now. If you want to skip to how you would add the skirt, if you want to make this version with the sleeves, I will leave a timestamp on the screen now. So if you want to make the sleeveless version, you're going to take your lining and with right sides facing together, I'm going to line them up and pin them in place. So I'm going to pin around the neckline, and then I'm going to pin around each armhole. And then I'm just going to repeat exactly the same thing for my second piece. So now that you have all of your pins in place, I'm going to go in and sew these edges. So I'm going to sew around the armhole, around the neckline, and the armhole on the other side. I'm going to do that on both of them, making sure that you leave this top strap open up here. And then once you have sewn these seams with either a zigzag stitch or an overlocker, I'm then going to go in with some flat braided elastic. This is optional, but I would recommend it just for a little bit of extra structure and support. And I'm going to place that elastic right on top of the seam that we will have just sewn. So I'm going to place it all the way around the armholes, the neckline, and the armhole on the other side. So I'm going to start with the neckline and just pass that under there, and then follow the curve around. And then once you've got your seams in place, if you are choosing to add the elastic, if you've got two different fabrics like I have, like you've chose to do your lining in a different fabric, I would recommend putting the elastic on the side for your dress fabric. So I'm going to put mine on top of this flower side. I'm just going to hold it in place. And then I'm just going to use my finger to guide it round. Make sure you're not stretching it as you do this. And then repeat the same steps for your other piece. So once you have sewn all of those seams in place and the elastic, if you want to add that, I actually added this elastic on to the wrong side, but it won't make enough of a difference for me to unpick it, so I've just left it. So I'm going to take this piece and turn it to the right side out. And I'm going to place it up inside this piece. So you want to make sure the right fabric is facing the right fabric if you are using two different fabrics like I am. So here I've got the flowers facing the flowers. I'm going to pass that up into the strap. And then I'm just going to line that up, so you're lining up 4 layers of fabric here. and I'm going to pin that in place. And then just do exactly the same thing with the other strap. And then I'm just going to line up the side seams, just lining up all of your layers of fabric. And again, pin that in place. And then the same thing with this side. And then once you've got all that pinned, I'm just going to go in and sew along these top edges. So that will be through 4 layers of fabric, and along these sides of the top, which again will be 4 layers of fabric. So you either want to do this with a zigzag stitch or an overlocker. So once you have sewn the top of the straps and the side of the top, I'm just going to turn this to the right side out. So it will look something like this, and you can leave it like this and move on to your skirt, but I am going to add a little bit of top stitching just because it makes it have a bit more of a professional finish. So I'm just going to follow the neckline and the armholes with a zigzag stitch. I'm going to follow it all around. You can do this as well on the version with the sleeves. You follow exactly the same paths. So I'm just going to grab my regular sewing machine to do this. So I've just set my machine to the smallest option of the zigzag stitch. I'm going to place it under there, and I'm just going to try and go just along the edge of the elastic that we placed. And just reverse to secure that stitch. I'm just going to slowly follow this neckline round, and then I'm going to do exactly the same for the armholes. So this is what it will look like once you have finished your top stitching. So I just went all around the armholes and the neckline. Just take your time with it, do it nice and slowly. I am actually really bad at doing it slowly because I am impatient, but the slower you do it, the neater you'll be able to get it. So I've done this one, and then I've also done the one with the sleeves. So on this one I went around the neckline, and I also went around the armholes. Obviously it's completely up to you if you want to do this or not, because it's not 100% necessary, but I do think it makes them look a lot better when they're finished. So now I'm going to move on to the skirts. So I'm going to take one of my skirt pieces. I did manage to get enough fabric together to do another version of these that were the right way up. I'm also going to take 2 of my pocket pieces, but I'm going to take 2 that are in the opposite orientation. So this one has the straight edge facing left, and then this one has the straight edge facing right. So I'm just going to line these up with the top of the skirt, and with right sides facing together, I'm going to pin that at the very edge of the skirt. And then just do exactly the same for the other side. And then once you've pinned them in place, I'm just going to go and sew this with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch. So once you've added the pockets to both of your skirt pieces, I'm going to lay one on top of the other with right sides facing together. I'm just going to start to pin them together. So I'm going to start with the top of the pocket. Just on the top of the pocket, but make sure obviously you leave the top of the skirt open. And and then down along the side of the pocket, and then down the side of the skirt. And then just repeat that for the other side. And then once you have pinned all the way down each side, I'm going to go in and sew that with an overlocker, or you can use a zigzag stitch. So once you have sewn down the sides of your skirt and your pockets, you're going to add your top. And this is the same process whether you have the sleeveless top or one of the tops with the sleeves. So I'm just going to take this with, this one should be the right side out and your skirt should still be inside out. And I'm going to place it inside the skirt. And then I'm just going to match up the side seams of the skirt with the side seams of the top, and just start to pin this in place. Obviously you've got 4 layers here, but you will only be pinning 2 of the layers to the top of the top to the 1 layer of the skirt. And then on this side I'm going to do the same thing. Just lining up those side seams and pinning it in place. And then I'm just going to go in and pin the rest of the way round. If you want to be slightly more precise about this, you can find the center point between your side seams of your skirt at the front and the back, and then do the same for the top so that you can match this bit up as well. But I normally find that this works absolutely fine. So then you've got your circle here, which will be your waist, and I'm just going to go in and sew this with my overlocker. Obviously you can use a zigzag stitch as well. So once you have finished attaching your top, you can turn it to the right side out, and now all that's left to do is to hem the bottom of the skirt, and if you have sleeves potentially you might still need to do that. So for all of your hems I would recommend a single hem with some interfacing like I've got here, and it's going to be the same hem on the bottom of the skirt as on your sleeves. So I'm just going to show you how to do it on this piece of the skirt that I actually cut upside down just because it's going to be easier. So I've got my iron, and to place my interfacing just down here, I'm just going to fold that up into the interfacing and press it in place. And this can be quite tricky because it's a curved edge, so just do it a small amount at a time, which is going to take quite a while with the skirt because the skirt is quite big. You will get there eventually. So I'm just going to carry on doing that around the rest of the skirt, and then I'm going to sew it in place with a zigzag stitch. So once I've finished doing this edge, I will show you how I do that. So I've just finished pressing all of my hems with the interfacing, and then I'm going to sew them in place. I'm going to do this on the short sleeve. So I'm just going to line up the bottom of this edge with this edge of the sewing machine, and I've got my sewing machine set to the middle size zigzag. I'm just going to slowly sew around this hem, just keeping this edge even with the edge of the sewing machine foot all the way around. And this is going to be the exact same method for the bottom of the skirt and for the flared sleeve as well. And then once you get to your starting point, just match it up. And then cut your threads. And then you've got your hem in place, and then obviously just repeat for the bottom of your skirt and your other sleeve. So then once you have all of your hems in place, your dress is done. The only final thing that you might want to do is to sew the top of your pocket into the waistband, just going over that with a top stitch, just if you don't want the pocket to be kind of like floating around inside the skirt. But I prefer the way that it looks when it's not sewn in, because it gives the skirt a tiny bit of extra volume. Obviously that is up to you.